All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cash and Sport. We are over here today talking about the Paralympics. There's a couple of things that we're going to touch on over there. And then there's a couple of big stories in the world of sport and the world of sport business in general, because after the Paralympics, we're going to start looking more at African sports business and what's going on in the big stories around business in the world, and take you guys a little bit behind the scenes of, what we find over there. But myself and Sans today are talking firstly to start off with the Paralympics. We're going, finally, our team was announced over the weekend. The SASCOC put out an announcement on Saturday, and they announced that we've got a relatively small squad, but we're going to the Paralympics. And so how do you think about that?
Yeah, look, the Paralympics have always been a highlight for us. We get lots of medals compared to the Olympics, so that's been a good one. But this one is a relatively small team, so let's see how it fares. I think the preparation obviously was probably hampered like the Olympics, and that will come into play. But I don't think there's been many global meets anyway for different athletes around the globe. So this might be a leveler, call it that. A few athletes will be seeing each other for the first time in a while. So, I mean, the first couple of days of competition, everyone will just get into it. And then we'll, as I think people should look out on the Cash and Sport website and Twitter handles, and then you'll break down the different categories as well. We must be mindful of that. People compete in different categories, and that's how we probably rack up the medals. So pretty excited about this one. I've had Olympic FOMO, so looking forward to the different athletes competing. And in different disciplines, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and for those who might not know, the Olympics are are one category, but then the Paralympics on their own are very different, but also they're very similar. They're also going to be competing in the same stadiums and the same venues, but the Paralympics works on a classification system, and depending on the level of disability, you could have a 100-meter race with maybe 5 different classifications within the race, because they try and match almost like for like disabilities against each other, which is very difficult. I mean, you could get brain injury, you could get eyesight problems, you could get limb dysfunction or complete amputation at times, etc. But they try and match them up as close as possible to the level of disability of other athletes, and then they pair them up together. But even then, athletes would still be running within their classification, and then it's a very technical system, and the same goes for other sports as well, like wheelchair basketball, swimming, etc. They're all there. Most of them are there, but there's a lot of variation. So there's going to be a lot of learning. And as Sanani said, go on to the Cash and Sport Twitter page, where there's a whole rundown on the different classifications and how they work. And then there's also a list of who our Paralympians are, because sadly, most people don't really know who our Paralympians are. So throughout this week, we've been highlighting who they are, what they do, and what their stories are, so that people can get behind them and get to know them. We do,
and I think that's important, Naj. Sorry about that. I think that's important to know who, as much as all our athletes, Olympics and Paralympians, we're needing to be knowing before we go, to these big tournaments. And I think that's how we get behind the sports. That's how we understand what categories they're performing in, and just really get the gears in the country behind the Paralympics as well. So I think there's a big job to be done there, and Cash and Sport is doing that job, but there's a bigger job for call it mainstream media. I don't even think there's such a thing these days, but the likes of TV and radio, to be making sure they're putting the names out there, highlighting and profiling the athletes.
Yeah, and I know Supersport will be carrying the Olympics, the Paralympics. I'm not 100% sure about the SABC and what their coverage will be like. But we definitely need more exposure, because it's our differently abled athletes are very capable, and they'll always bring back medals. And let's talk about those medal hopefuls. I mean, we've got some really young athletes as well. I mean, we've got Ntando Mahlangu, who was 14 when he was in Rio. He's 17 this year, and he's gunning for, I think he's got the world record in the 200, and he's gunning for medals in the 100, the 200. He's also apparently, I think, might do the long jump. Really quick young kid. His idol is Caster Semenya, so he does the whole dust off your shoulders thing, eagle thing. Really, really quick. And then we've got Simone Kruger. She's a discus thrower, but she also is really good in the shot put, and she's a double world record holder in her classification.
Yeah.
But apparently, I think they've paired her against another athlete who is almost similarly abled and has very similar, length of throwing. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. But she's a very good contender for a medal. We have our grand old daddy, Ernst van Dijk. He's at his 8th.
I mean, the name says it for itself.
Yeah.
You look at his accolades, and it's all there. What a phenomenal athlete, man! I'm glad to see him still competing.
It's incredible. He's at his 8th Paralympics. He's won the Boston Marathon more than anyone of any physical classification ever. He's the world record holder for most wins at the Boston Marathon with 9, which is incredible. I mean, New York, London, etc. He's won them all, and he's still competing. It's incredible. I mean, it's an outstanding achievement for him to even be there at 48 years old. That's ridiculous. And then
most people are just at home minding their own business at 48.
Yeah, but it just goes to show.
Well.
It just goes to show there's no limits to anyone, really. You can compete.
That's it.
You can compete, really. As long as you get yourself out there and get yourself ready to rumble, you can compete. We've got a few more medal hopefuls, and the likelihood is that we probably will bring back more medals than the regular Olympics. So if I just rack up the list here, our biggest contingent is in athletics, which is going to be men's athletics and women's athletics. They make up more than half of the team. Anroon Veyers is a sprinter. She runs 100, 200, and the 400. She was actually, I think, she was thinking of not doing the Tokyo Olympics, but apparently someone spoke to her and she's going to be there. Domizane Lesitu is another athlete. Joanna Pretorius is our host. Bomelelo Mhlongo is another athlete. He's at UCT. He's a really smart guy. Apparently got 7 distinctions matric, chemical engineer, just incredible. And he's also really quick. He runs the 100 and the 200 sprints. We've got a really strong team. We've got 34 athletes there. The games start on the 24th of August, end on the 5th of September. And we will be bringing you all the action from Tokyo. But let's move on a little bit to the business side. There's no fans again, but there will be school children which will be allowed and maybe take inspiration from those athletes.
Yeah, I think that's inspirational. I think as a young kid going to see the athletes perform and do what they do, it just gives you, you can achieve as well. I've always said the Paralympians, as much as we look at the Olympians, the Paralympians go above and beyond. And they just do phenomenal things. So for the young kids in Tokyo and Japan to see that and be able to say, hang on, even if I'm differently abled, I can do this. It's going to be good for them. I think we've seen from the Olympics that, as much as a lot of people were skeptical about it going into it, the IOC and the Paralympic Committee managed to control the numbers of COVID cases, which they've done very well. It is going to come at a high bill. We know that. I mean, having a COVID test every day is not cheap, but those were the measures they had to take to make sure the games went on. We're hoping that these games will go without a glitch as well, without an outbreak. I think it was contained very well during the Olympics. So I'm looking forward to phenomenal games on a smaller scale, obviously, but none always impactful.
Yeah, absolutely, and it can only be testament to the efforts of the Japanese people that they've watched the games. The numbers looked good in terms of people in Japan watching the games, and there was all of this concern around people not wanting the games to be there, etc. But they've rallied along, and they've come along and said, no, it's fine. We will watch the games because they're in our home country. We understand the circumstances are what they are, but it's life. It happens.
I mean, speaking to some of the athletes who got back from Tokyo recently, it was just like, what gracious hosts, what lovely, welcoming, friendly hosts the Japanese people were. And I don't think we expected any, less from them. So sucked it up and said, okay, these games are happening. How do we welcome people into our city to come back again? So they did that very well.
Yeah, and it'll always be, again, we always keep on coming back to this, but there needs to be another way for business around the Olympics to be done. For the Japanese to really hit the bottom of the barrel in terms of worst of luck, in terms of timing and costing and etc. Something needs to be done so that it just works out for everyone. But anyway, let's move on to another business-minded story. One of the big stories that's been going on lately in the world this past week, Leonel Messi, PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, assembling the Rolls-Royce of Rolls-Royce football teams. I mean, come on.
Look, I don't even think any of us were like, when Mbappe got there, when Neymar got there, we started watching a bit of French league. But now we are going to watch. And I think the guys who are winning are guys who had the rights to the league before Neymar, before Messi got there. I know Amazon had bought a few games to stream on their Prime platform. They don't have all the rights. They got a few games. I'm sure they'll buy more rights in this case. But talk about assembling a team that can compete against the world's best. But the one thing I always say, it's synergy. You can get all those players, and there's big names in that change room now. There's big egos, and I think Poch is going to need to find the synergy in that group. He's going to need to find leaders that and everyone to know their role. I think that's more than important. And understand that Messi is Messi, but he's still a team player within the team. That's going to be very important. But in terms of money, man, it's going to bring about a lot of questions. How did they afford the salary? Yes, Barcelona are on their own problems. But when you look at those salary caps within that team, their bill's not cheap. So it's going to raise questions. We know that FIFA are reviewing their financial fair play. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to roll out and what the new fair play will look like. But it's going to raise a lot of questions about money and football now.
Yeah, and especially about Barcelona as well. I mean, just the mere fact that they got to a position where their salary bill was 115% of their revenue. So essentially, you're running at a loss because of salaries, and that's even before you paid for other things.
Every month.
Every month. And then on top of that, you sign players hoping that your players within your squad that you already have will either take a pay cut or they'll leave. And then the players say, no, we're not leaving and we're not taking pay cuts. I mean, it's an absolute disaster. It's a disaster situation. And now I saw
and also there's no amount of prize money you're winning to fill that gap. So you can win all of them. You can win the Champions League, the Club World Cup. It's still not going to fill the gap. And you can have more sponsors come on board. But once the front of shirt is gone, the sleeve is gone, technical partner rights, call it brewing rights partner, pouring rights at the stadium partner. Yes, all those revenue streams were filled. But at 115%, when you haven't even paid anything, you haven't paid anything else, it's just salaries. It's huge.
And that's
there was
basically
proper
the reason,
mismanagement there.
And that's the reason why Messi couldn't sign him, because they just could not cut down on the wage bill. I think it was a really big mistake in the first place to try and to bring in Aguero, Memphis Depay, Eric Garcia, because they would have added to the wage bill. I mean, get rid of the bloat before you bring in these players and try and make room because Messi is your greatest ever player. I think the big loss, I don't care about whether they win the league, but they won't recover from the loss of Messi anytime soon. And that for me was the one thing.
Especially now.
Sorry,
that he wanted to stay this season.
Yes.
It's different to last season when he wanted to leave. So this year you've got him ready to sign. I mean, Messi said his dad spent the whole day, in conversation, and they still couldn't get it across the line.
No, but they wouldn't have been able to, because if the numbers don't balance, the numbers don't balance. But anyway, we also have our own shenanigans going on over here with just I mean, how do you even explain the status sales debacle that's rambling on right now? So we had, let's go back. Takuma TTM, let's just call it TTM for those who with tongues that can't twist. TTM buys the status of Wits, 99 years gone. TTM lost, the owners of TTM lost in the league barely a year. They sell to another guy who buys the status, or the club, or well, actually no, the status, and renames the club Maruma Gallants. Then the guy from TTM says, nah, actually I want to come back to the league, which is now. And at the same time, Royal AM and Sekhukhune United are busy in their PSL rankings about who's actually going to come up. It actually turns out that Royal AM is staying in the NFD and Sekhukhune is coming up, so Sekhukhune is fine. Then Royal AM says, no, we want Mam Kize and her son Andile, they must come to the PSL and be the youngest chairman in the league. So what is Royal AM going to do? Buy Bloemfontein Celtics. The club is finished. 59 years of history gone. Bloemfontein Celtics, all of their fans now moving to Durban. The players apparently were told in the change room after the media
on the day
broke to the media. I mean, and now the guy who bought TTM originally, who bought VIT status, originally, Masala Mulaudzi, has bought the status of TTM in the NFD, and TTM is back in the NFD after having been replaced.
Can you hear just explaining it that it doesn't make sense? Like just by mere fact of you trying to break it down and explain it doesn't make sense. So when we say to people who ask us about our football and you talk about selling statuses, everyone's like, selling a status? What do you mean selling a club? I'm like, no, you're not selling a club, you're selling a status. Anyone who football and you talk about selling a status, no one gets it. They go selling a club and you go, no, you don't selling a club, you're selling a status in a league, which is by any conversation, understanding is wild. And it's and I understand. Look, I listened to the press conference today and I was none the wiser when I finished the press conference, and I was like, I still don't get it in terms of, yes, there's not enough money, and it's a lot of money to run a club. But at the same time, we've got to sell the clubs and not the status and the financial constraints clubs owners are under. And people that go into this thing, look at it globally. Don't go in, to make millions and millions of rand. They instead put in a lot of money. And also look at Liverpool. Different stakeholders. Look at, yes, they've got a controlling share, but different stakeholders. Look at, lots of teams. Maybe we need to start looking at that. How many people can bring their 4%, their 5% to be able to run a club? Because it's not cheap, yes. But the situation, how many original clubs actually, Nabs, not looking at it, how many original clubs do we have right now in the league? 6 or 7? Original.
Actually, that'll be a really good question. I need to go take a look at that. But I think it's about 5, actually.
Let's look at 5. That.
Yeah. But the issue around status sales, I think, needs a couple of simple resolutions. One, I agree with you on not selling the clubs, on not selling status. Selling status should be gone. And I completely disagree with the chairman when he says that it's a willing buyer, willing seller, etc. You have to protect the integrity of the league. The integrity of the league gets damaged when overnight 99 years of history is gone and 50 odd years of history is gone. Just by selling it. It doesn't make sense. And then 2, you have to have a system in place which ensures that whoever's buying the club has the money, has the staying power, so they have to make a proposal, that makes financial sense with guarantees of longevity. And if they don't stay, then sell it to someone else. But don't sell the status. You can't sell a position in a league. All the teams compete to be in that league. And then you go and sell your position to someone else who's never had a football team just because they've got money. I mean, it's
and I think you've got a point there. Maybe they sell, but you can't, even if your ownership ownership. You can't resell within 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, intersell of these statuses. We really need to look at that, because then essentially, why do we have a league to come first or second or third? Because then if I'm third or fourth and I can't afford it, or someone else can afford it, then we're just doing this, and it just puts the league in a bad way, man. Like we really have got such a great product in South Africa. The fans love it. The fans are invested in our football. We need to treat it better. It's a good product.
It's like the financial markets. If it's stable, people will invest. If it's not stable, people are like, ooh, they get spooked.
Yeah.
So yeah. But anyway, we've rambled on quite a bit. We've decided to cut these conversations a little bit shorter than the 40 odd minutes that we used to hit before. We're going to be looking at the Paralympics as they kick off next week. It's about 7 days to go now to the Paralympics. We're going to be looking at sports business news after the Paralympics, and that's in the future of Cash and Sport. We'll be looking at individual series and bringing you guys weekly sports business news, which is exciting, and guests and all of that other nice stuff.
We'll dive into stuff like that. We'll dive into, you know, stadium ownership, because that's another one that fascinates me. Who owns a stadium, how those revenue models work. So we're quite excited about the content that we'll bring you. If you've got any questions you want to know in the sports industry or the finances of that, pop them in at Cash and Sport, and we'll create some content around that.
Or drop us a like in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. You know where to find us. Social media, Cash and Sport, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, everywhere you go. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you guys again next week. And enjoy the weekend.